Hi friends, hope you're having a great weekend. Today I'm going to create a simple and elegant card using some handmade translucent papers plus some dies from the new paper discovery release called A Japanese Dream. The card I'm making today is going to be a standard A2 size, that is 4¼ by 5½ inches. Here I have created a top folding card base out of white cardstock. I'm also going to use a nested rectangle die set by Memory Box, which is a must-have for everyone who likes making A2 size cards. I'm going to use the 5th largest die to create a frame. So I'm just placing the die onto the card base, I'm taping it down, and then I'm going to send both layers through the die cutting machine just like that in the folded position. After sending it through the die cutting machine, I'm removing the die and the insides of the frame, and I was happy and surprised to find out that the die did cut through both layers of thick cardstock. But since all machines are a little bit different and the cardstock can be different thickness, you might be in a situation when the top layer is die cut but the bottom one is not. And in this case, all you have to do is to open up the card base, place the die right onto the indentation and send it through one more time. And in both cases, the frames at the top and at the bottom side of the card base will be perfectly aligned. Then I went ahead and created 2 more additional frames. For those, the inside of the frame is exactly the same die that I used for the card base. Here is this one, but the outside one is the 2nd largest instead of the very largest die, and this way that frame will be just a little bit smaller than my card base. The next step is creating the background, and for this I'm going to use that beautiful handmade paper. It's translucent, and as you can see, it has real flower petals incorporated into the paper. If you use translucent materials like this one, you can backlit your card and it's going to add a really pretty dramatic effect. So now I'm going to trim down the sheet of paper to be slightly larger than the inside of my frame. And you can use a paper trimmer or a die. I'll be using a die since I do have that pretty convenient die set. Assembling the card is pretty simple. I just have to apply a thin layer of glue, just a tiny amount, all around the inside of the frame, and then I'm placing the background piece of paper on top. I'm going to repeat this process both for the outside and the inside of the card. As always, the tools and materials that I'm using are listed down below in the description box, as well as on my blog with links to online stores. Then I'm going to stick down the little open frame that I have created on top of the background paper. This way I'm going to trap that piece of paper between the 2 frames, and I'm going to completely hide the edge of paper. Here is the finished card base. You can see because the top frame is a bit smaller than the card base, it also creates some simple but elegant additional dimension. Also, as the light is coming through the paper, it makes the petals stand out more, and that's a really beautiful effect. And now I'm going to create a little scene. I'll be using that frame die again to trim down a piece of patterned paper to the size of the inside of the frame, and this way it's going to fit right inside. Now, when my piece of paper is the right size, I'm going to use one of the dies from the new Japanese garden die set to create the ground line. Actually, that die set is meant to create really large cards that are about 6 by 8 inches, but I just wanted to demonstrate that all of those dies, except the outer frame, can be used for much smaller card formats. Even the garden pavilion can be fitted into an A2 size card. So here is my ground, and now I'm just going to apply some liquid glue and stick it down right into the frame at the bottom edge. By the way, this paper does not behave just as vellum, and the glue is not showing through the paper, especially if you apply a small amount of it. Now when we have the sky and the ground, it's time to add some life into the scene. I'll be using some dies from Japanese Icons die set, also from the new Paper Discovery release. I've die cut that magnolia branch out of plain white cardstock, the same one that I used for the card base. Then I have also die cut an umbrella. This one consists of two pieces. I've die cut the top out of red pattern paper and the bottom out of white cardstock. The die creates a little debossed line, and I'm going to use a craft knife and simply create a cut along that line, and then I'm going to insert the base of the umbrella into that cut. I'm also adding some glue to fix both pieces in place. Then I'm going to apply some glue again and lay that umbrella onto the ground. Again, don't be afraid, the glue is not showing through and the card is going to look perfect on all sides, inside and outside. Next, I'm going to attach the branch exactly the same way. I'm going to trim it down to fit inside the frame. Then I'm going to apply some glue and stick it onto the background. I have actually die cut that branch twice in case I'm going to need more blossoms, but I think one is totally enough for this composition. As a finishing touch, I'm also going to add a couple of little birds. One is a perched bird and another one is flying, and those ones are from Bird and Branch die set that was released previously. Unfortunately, it's currently out of stock, but I hope it will be back really soon. And that finishes my card. It was really easy to create and I just love the look. I think it's one of my favorite cards ever. So I felt so inspired, I couldn't stop at that point, so I decided to create a matching envelope for this card. I normally use an envelope punch board by We Are Memory Keepers to create all my envelopes, and this time it's no exception. All you have to do is just follow the instruction on the board. You trim down the paper to the right size according to the size of your card, and then you punch and score again following the instructions. It's pretty easy to do. Another nice thing about that punch board is that it creates an envelope that is a tiny bit larger than the card, and this way dimensional cards fit in just perfectly. Instead of sticking down the tabs, I'm going to create a belt that you can kind of slip onto the envelope. To create that belt, I'll be using the decorative strip die, also from Japanese Icons die set. I've die cut it twice because one strip is just not enough to wrap all around the envelope. I trimmed down a scrap piece of patterned paper, it's the same one that I used for an umbrella, to the width of my paper strips, and then I'm just going to stick it down on top of two strips, and this way they will be connected. By the way, although the pattern on a strip is super intricate, it's really easy to die cut. Actually, I die cut it at one go just because the strip is narrow and that makes the right pressure in the machine. Next, I'm just wrapping my strip of paper around the envelope like that, and then I'm going to trim it down to the size. I'm not pre-measuring anything in this case, I'm just going with the flow. To connect the two open ends of that strip, I'm going to use a couple of dies from the Japanese garden die set, the one that I have already used on this project. I've die cut a circle and some bamboo shoots out of pattern papers that I have already used on a card, and this way the envelope is going to match even more. Now I'm going to adhere the circle onto both ends of the strip, and I'm going to top it up with the bamboo shoots. I'm also using a scratch piece of paper to place it between the two sides of the strip so that I won't stick them together. Now I'm going to slip that belt onto the envelope, and it's going to keep the envelope perfectly closed. Also, you can put it on and off as many times as you want. And this is how the finished project looks like. Now we can take off the belt and open up the envelope. Now I'd like to say a couple of words about adding the message to that card. You can totally write on top of that handmade paper. I would suggest to use a fine point ballpoint pen or a signature pen, and this way the writing will not show through the front of the card. And of course, the translucent card is going to look different with different types of lighting, so I would suggest to display it on a windowsill. Thank you so much for visiting me today. I hope you enjoyed watching. Have a beautiful day, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.